Welcome to the Troy Talk Podcast, your home for anything and everything sports. Sit back, enjoy, and here's your host, Troy.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Troy Talk Podcast. Clay Helton returns to the Coliseum. We have a jam-packed show today where we are briefly going to go over last weekend's game, talk about USC's next opponent in Georgia Southern, and discuss what I want to see out of this week's game, and much, much more. If you haven't already, please support the channel by liking and subscribing if you enjoy the content. All right, let's get it rolling. So just to briefly go over last week, still reeling from it. It was so refreshing to see USC dominate in the fashion that we know that they're able to do. So a lot to be excited about. However, it is important to take a step back and realize the competition that we were playing and that the games are going to get progressively more difficult from here on out. Now, the good news is, which we'll go in a little bit, Georgia Southern shouldn't be too much of a test for USC either. I think the spread's at minus 28 or around there. So should be a pretty comfortable game, especially after they had a really rough performance against Fresno State last week. But, 73-13 is still not easy to do. No matter how you slice it, there are teams that played bad teams all across the country that were supposed to be good and didn't dominate in the fashion that USC did. So all you can do is play who's in front of you and dominate in the fashion that they did. And you just got to take it week by week. So going to go into the preview. So all we pretty much know is Clay Helton's the head coach. I don't expect a lot of people to actually follow Georgia State or Georgia Southern football. And it's pretty self-explanatory that this year is probably not going to be great for Clay. They got absolutely whooped last week against Fresno State. It was actually decently close at halftime. I think it was like 14-13. And I don't think they scored in the second half. And Fresno State beat them, I think it was 42-14, which was pretty interesting because Fresno State got whooped the week before against Kansas, or at least the week 0 game against Kansas. And I was kind of wondering if Fresno State was going to even win a game this year. And then they absolutely dominated Georgia Southern, who a lot of people predicted to win the Sun Belt or at least get second in the Sun Belt this year. So just a brief overview. Their last game, they played against Fresno State. They have a quarterback, EJ Warner, who you might remember as Kurt Warner's son. He had 2 interceptions, didn't have that good a game, and they still won by 30. Their ground game absolutely dominated Georgia Southern, which is going to be something that USC, I think, is looking to be taken advantage of. They gave up 350 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. So you'll see Waymo, Eli Sanders, Brian Jackson all probably get heavy touches this game. Now, again, it'll be interesting to see this share of the snaps because I have a feeling USC is going to want to keep Waymo on a little bit of a snap count and keep him fresh for those Big Ten games. And I thought you saw Eli. I think he only got 6 or 7 carries max, and then Brian Jackson. You even saw a little bit of King Mo last game. So it wouldn't shock me if you see maybe a little bit more snaps than they got last game, but a similar rotation because it's going to be very important to keep everybody healthy going into the Big Ten schedule. Somebody to look out for on their defense. It's not a good defense at all. Obviously, giving up 42 points to Fresno State, they can't be good. But they do have a pretty good defender, Chance Gamble, who's defensive back, got an interception last game, so someone to watch out for there. As far as on the offensive side of the ball, that's what everybody was raving about in the offseason. They returned their quarterback, J.C. French. Just getting some preseason hype there, but he's a turnover machine. He does like to use his legs, which I mentioned in the season preview that has given USC some trouble in the past, but I don't really anticipate he's not that dynamic to where I'm going to be worried about it, and I think our defense is looking so much better this year that it wouldn't worry about when Josh Dallas and Cameron Brown are their 2 receivers, actually pretty decent receivers. I don't think their offense is that bad, even though they only scored 14 points against Fresno State. I think that was a little bit of a fluke, but I don't really see them scoring that many points against USC despite having some talent on that side of the field. No run game really whatsoever, and I think you're not going to see much of it anyway because they're going to be down pretty quickly. So it'll be a lot of JC French. Wouldn't be shocked you see 2 or 3 interceptions this game too, and Clay might have to kind of decide about his QB future. He might just have to ride with them, and hopefully he saves his job. But yeah, I mean, it's a Clay Helton revenge game. So as far as the spread, like I said, I don't really like to do spreads with USC football, but I think it was at minus 27.5 earlier on in the week, and I agree with that. I would probably take it. Clay might have a little bit of revenge on his mind and kind of, play up to competition, but I also think Lincoln Riley is going to want to put it on him too. One, because he wants to dominate early on in the season and create some momentum for USC, but also, I mean, beating the previous coach, you don't want to, get shown up by the previous coach, especially a coach that essentially USC ran out of town. So I think it'll be an interesting game. It'll be a fun game and something that USC should dominate. So what I want to see, I should start by saying I can't really ask for much more than last week. If we did that every week, then I'm going to be happy. But I want to see the aggression on defense stay the same. I want to see rushing the passer, creating pressure off of 4-man lines is really important, something USC couldn't do in the past, but I think you saw it a lot last week. Now, obviously, the step up in competition, while it's not crazy, it is still a little bit. So it remains to be seen whether USC can create that consistent pressure as the games get harder. But, the creative blitzing, really putting our players that are so talented in positions to succeed and get to the quarterback, unlike we did last year. That's what I want to see. I'm also interested to see some of the injured players might be back this week. I'm not sure about Jakeem Stewart. I personally wouldn't rush him back for this game. I know Chasen Johnson was very close to playing last week, so you might see him. But more or less, I still want to see the heavy rotation that we saw last week. Obviously, that's going to help if we're, up 28, 35 points, something like that. But just seeing so many people kind of have their coming out party, Marquise Gallegos, King Miller, even some of the younger receivers, the younger linebackers, Jaden Walker, Elijah Newby, and even some of the cornerbacks, Braylon Conley. So much talent on this USC defense and even offense too that we haven't got to see the last couple of years because we haven't been blowing teams out. So we really need to take advantage of these games early on in the season, blow these teams out, and get some early reps for these youngsters. All right, next, wanted to briefly talk about the USC FPI rankings. It had us at number 6. So for those that don't know what is FPI, it's like a ESPN, I forgot what the FP stands for, but it's like an index analytic model that bases off of expected play on offense, defense, special teams, and also how much you beat a team by and how dominating it was, and a bunch of other factors. I think a lot of people would be surprised to see USC at number 6. Now that there are some probably homers out there and say, like, I told you so, USC is a top 10 team. I probably want to pump the brakes on that a little bit. I'm very excited about what we saw last week, and I know the potential of this team to be a top 10 team, but I'm going to need to see it against better competition. And I'm not even sure we're going to have our answer this week either. I think once we start getting into Big Ten play, we might have a better answer and kind of better viewpoint on what this USC team could be. And the reason that number 6 ranking also is a little, I don't want to call it fraudulent, but like Miami is, I think, 15th in that, and they beat a good Notre Dame team. Texas remained number 1. So it takes into consideration if you had a good loss or a really good win. Obviously, USC beat a team by 60 or whatever it was, 56. And the FPI model takes that into consideration and gives USC a huge boost because of that. There are other teams that are behind USC. I think even LSU is behind USC, and LSU beat Clemson on the road, which is, no disrespect to USC, but that's a much more impressive win, and I would rank LSU higher than USC currently. So just something to take into consideration. I'm still very optimistic about this season. I think it predicts us to win 10 games, which I think my prediction was 9-3. I think after seeing last week, I wasn't expecting it to be that dominating, so I probably would upgrade it a little bit to like a 10-2 prediction. Maybe those Illinois and Nebraska games that I was a little iffy on in the past, I'm a little bit more confident on now. Still remains to be seen about that Notre Dame and Oregon, but look, Notre Dame looked beatable, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. I just kind of wanted to briefly go over that and just say, hey, let's be patient, pump the brakes a little bit, and just take it game by game, which is the kind of mentality that we need to be taking. So what is my score prediction? I'm going to go 52-17. I think that's covering the spread. I think that Georgia State still has a good offense, and it's better offense than you saw with Missouri State. So I think a slight uptick in that. But I think, obviously the one touchdown against Missouri State was a blown coverage. So you take that away, it was, 6 points. So I think 17 is probably on the upper end. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 10 or 14 or 13, something like that range. And I think USC should be able to put on 50 plus. Obviously, it's going to be a lot more running, which means that the game goes by a little bit quicker. So that's why I don't expect like a 60 or 70 point. And we also had a pick 6 last game too. So I think 52-17 is totally reasonable. If they do that, I think we have played a really good game. A brief recap on the NCAA Week 1 games. There was a lot of really interesting ones. I wouldn't say the quality of football was super good, but just to briefly go over it, Ohio State, Texas, that was a lot lower scoring than I thought it was going to be. Arch Manning obviously looked rough, but a very difficult place to play on the road against Ohio State, defending national championships against that defense. Obviously, Matt Barkley made it look really good, so it is doable. And I think people are kind of understanding that Arch had a lot of hype behind him and that he still has not proven it on the football field yet. So Texas's defense is still really good. I foresee both of those will be playoff teams, and both of them will improve after that first game because it was a little sloppy. LSU Clemson was another one I wanted to talk about. LSU is honestly might be my pick to win the national championship at this point. I think that they played fantastic in a very hostile environment. Their defense, which was a little bit of a concern last year, it looked night and day different, like one of the best defenses in the country. They have one of the best quarterbacks in the country, a veteran leadership there, great wide receivers, a solid running back room. Offensive line might be a little bit weaker than they were last year, but I mean, it's hard to say that they have a weakness other than Brian Kelly being their coach. So if they can overcome that, which is a big if, I see them doing some damage and possibly winning the national championship. As far as Clemson, I would downgrade them a little bit in my power rankings. Klubnik was not as impressive as I thought he'd be in the quarterback position. Their defense was still really good, I thought, but not as good as, not like dominating. LSU kind of moved the ball on them pretty easily, which was kind of surprising to see. But I think Clemson's still a playoff team. That ACC is, I think, a little weaker than I think other conferences like the Big Ten or SEC. So they'll still make the playoffs. I think they'll still likely win the ACC. And who knows, we might get a rematch of that game in the future. And then lastly, there was one last. The Notre Dame Miami game. So kind of went how I expected it. The spread was like -2.5, -3. I think Notre Dame has some question marks. I thought their quarterback was actually better than I thought he was going to be. And then their offensive line and defensive line were worse than I thought they were going to be. I think people flaunted that vaunted Notre Dame offensive line, even after they lost so many people to the transfer portal. Same thing with the defensive line. But I mean, Miami dominated that game. Shouldn't have even been as close as it was. Good on Miami. I think their defense is a lot better. Their pass rush is great. Their quarterback's solid. I'm actually a bigger Carson Beck fan than I think many people are. But still pump the brakes. They have Mario Cristobal, in the same light as the LSU has Brian Kelly. They're going to have to overcome Mario Cristobal as a coach because he is still not a good game manager. And when those playoff games come down to the wire, I do not trust him at all. So great performance, though. Gotta tip my cap to them. And then lastly, Troy Talk picks. So our current record is 5-3. I think we went 4-3 last week with a 1-0 week 0 with our Hawaii pick. The slate is not great. So, I don't mind. I don't blame you if you skip this because it's completely boring. But just really quickly, James Madison at Louisville. Louisville's where Miller Moss is. I think they're a good team, but James Madison is a team I'm very high on and I think has a decent shot at making the college football playoff if they go undefeated. Plus 15.5, over 2 touchdowns, way too much. I think it finishes under 2 touchdowns. Iowa at Iowa State is always a close game. Anything under a field goal for Iowa State, though. Iowa did not look great last week. Offense did not look good. I'm just not sure that upgrade at quarterback is enough to beat Iowa State. Iowa State has the better quarterback. It's at Iowa State. Anything under a field goal there. Kennesaw State, Indiana. I know that sounds like super in the weeds, but it was mostly off of Indiana last week having a really poor offensive performance and also their defense not being as good as last year. You saw that crazy run that they made. I think Kurt Cignetti is going to want to put the points on this week, score 40 plus, and that which would mean that Kennesaw State only needs to score like 10. And I think that's easily done. Next one is going to be UCLA at UNLV. This is actually at UNLV, and I could, if I was in town, could go to this game, but unfortunately I will not be able to. Over 54.5, key numbers 55 there. UNLV's defense is bad. UCLA's defense is bad. I think Nico, while he had a really bad week against Utah, which is a good defense, UNLV's defense is really bad. So you'll see him kind of go back to his usual self and probably dominate a bad defense. So I think this is actually going to be a really high scoring game. And then lastly, Houston at Rice. This was a cool one that I just wanted to kind of talk about briefly. Rice went to a triple option this year, super in the weeds there, but from, I think they were like more of an air raid spread last year to a triple option. They had a really good week 1, pulled off an upset. Anything at 2 touchdowns or more, I really liked Rice here, and it's already moved under 2 touchdowns. So those are my picks for the week. Hopefully we have another good week. 5-0 would be great. Get to 10 wins and start off the season strong. If anybody has any questions, wants a sticker, please shoot me an email at troytalk3@gmail.com. And please remember to like and subscribe. I think it said something like 80% of the people that view this video are not subscribed to the channel. So any subscription really helps. I do appreciate it. And always in the comments, let me know below what you think about this game, what your score prediction is, and if you guys have any games that you're looking out for in this upcoming week. And that's about it. I will be having a recap podcast probably Sunday night to Monday morning because I'm going to be out of town this weekend, but definitely still going to be watching the game. So be on the lookout for that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. We will see you again next time.